Hello everyone. Today we'll be discussing about nominal GDP versus real GDP. So in this small lesson, you'll be learning about what is nominal GDP and what is real GDP, and also how to calculate real GDP using nominal GDP. At last, we'll be discussing about what are the differences between nominal GDP and real GDP. We all know we use market prices to calculate GDP. When we look at these market prices won't remain the same. For an example, I looked into iPhone market. I looked into iPhone prices from 2015 to 2019 and I could find this data. In 2015, the price of an average iPhone was in between $650 to $750. And by 2016, it has gone up to $770. By 2017, it has gone up to $999. And by 2019, an average iPhone prices have gone up from $700 to $1,100. So this is an example for us to understand market prices of goods and services won't remain the same. If you take an economy, if you take a country, there are millions of products trading in this country. So how do we find out the GDP accurately if the market prices are changing constantly? For this, we have a solution. We are going to find out the accurate method of calculating GDP using two different types of GDPs. One is nominal GDP, the other one is real GDP. So, what is nominal GDP? Nominal GDP is calculated at current market prices. It also includes all the changes in market prices that have occurred during the current year due to inflation or deflation. Real GDP is different from nominal GDP because real GDP is calculated at the market prices of some base year. Let's calculate real GDP using nominal GDP. Have a look at the table I'm sharing with you. In this table, you can see, for an instance, that a country's GDP measured at market prices in year 1 was 300 million. In the following year, year 2 is 350 million, and by year 3, it has gone up to 380 million. If you calculate from year 1 to year 2, the GDP has increased by 50 million. If you calculate it as a percentage, that is 16.6% between year 1 and year 2. In this case, the nominal value of GDP has increased, but not the real value. Because using $350 million in year 2, we are buying the same quantity of goods and services or same volume of goods and services we bought in year 1 using $300 million. Why? The value has gone up because the prices have increased from 100 to 110. We can adjust nominal GDP figures for inflation using index numbers. A price index measures the rate at which prices are changing over time. In the base year, the price index is 100, or else you can take any convenient number. For my example, I have taken 100. In the following years, price index is increased to reflect the changes in prices compared to base year. So for an instance, if you look at my price index, from year 1 to year 2, prices have gone up from 100 to 105. By year 3, it has gone further 105 to 108. So, according to my price index, prices have increased throughout. If you look at GDP values, we see in column 2, year 1 GDP is measured by market prices in year 1, and year 2 GDP, 350 million, is measured by market prices in year 2, and year 3 GDP is measured by market prices in year 3. So therefore, we call them GDP at current prices. Let's assume we need to find out the GDP in year 2 compared to the price changes happen in year 1. For that, we need to find out year 2 GDP at constant prices of year 1. For that, we can use this formula. Year 2 nominal GDP multiplied by year 1 price divided by year 2 price. Year 2 nominal GDP is 350 multiplied by year 1 price index, that is 100, divided by year 2 price index 105. So our answer is 333.33 million. So this is the real GDP, or else we can call this GDP at constant prices. So if you look at year 1 nominal GDP, that is 300. Year 2 nominal GDP is 350. But if you use the real GDP, year 2 real GDP is 333.33. That is less than the nominal GDP of year 2. That is why around the world, for comparisons among countries or comparisons between different years in a country, we are using real GDP statistics. Here I am going to talk about few differences between nominal GDP and real GDP. If you take inflation, nominal GDP does not take the inflation into the account, but real GDP is adjusted for inflation. Nominal GDP is based on current market prices, whereas real GDP is based on base year market prices. The value of nominal GDP is considering current market prices, therefore usually nominal GDP is higher. If you look at real GDP, that is lower than nominal GDP because it considers the current market prices of the base year. If you consider the popularity among academics or governments or even users of these GDP statistics, nominal GDP is less popular compared to real GDP. Since real GDP is known to be more accurate than nominal GDP, we mostly used real GDP. If you look at complexity, it's very easy to compute nominal GDP, but real GDP is little complex to compute. If you make the use of nominal GDP for comparisons, we mostly use nominal GDP to make comparisons between previous quarters. If you take a year, there are 4 quarters a year. So government can use these quarterly GDP statistics, quarterly nominal GDP statistics to compare the economic performance. But if you take real GDP for comparisons, we mostly use real GDP statistics to compare with previous years or compare with different countries. So these are the small differences we find in between nominal GDP and real GDP. Guys, our next lesson will be about using GDP as a measure of economic performance. So in this video, we'll be discussing about what are the advantages and disadvantages of using GDP as a measurement of economic performance. Stay tuned for my next video, and if you enjoyed this video, please do not forget to subscribe and like this video.